Tuesday, 12:15 p.m. I pulled into my driveway, the familiar crunch of gravel under my tires mixing with the sound of my heartbeat. The chicken soup from Romano's Deli sat steaming in the passenger seat. Extra noodles, just how Diane liked it when she was sick. She'd called in at dawn, her voice so hoarse I could barely understand her through what sounded like pneumonia. "Marcus, honey, don't come home for lunch today," she'd wheezed into the phone at 7 a.m. sharp. "This bug is absolutely terrible. I don't want you catching whatever plague I've got. I'm just going to sleep all day and try to recover." But 20 years of marriage teaches you things. You bring soup when your wife sounds like death, even when she insists you shouldn't. Especially when she insists you shouldn't. Her white BMW sat in the exact same spot it had occupied when I'd left for Lincoln High that morning. Driver's side door perfectly aligned with the crack in our driveway that we'd been meaning to fix for 3 years. Good. She'd followed my advice and stayed in bed instead of trying to power through whatever respiratory infection had knocked her flat. As I walked up the cobblestone path we'd installed for our 15th anniversary, I noticed something that made me pause. A silver Mercedes-Benz was parked one street over, tucked neatly behind the Hendersons' massive oak tree. The car looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place where I'd seen it before. Probably someone visiting the neighborhood. Our street had become popular with young families lately. I slid my key into the deadbolt as quietly as possible, not wanting to disturb Diane if she was finally getting the rest she desperately needed. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside. Warmer somehow, more humid than our usual climate-controlled 72 degrees. The air seemed thick, almost heavy. On the granite kitchen counter next to our coffee maker, I spotted a small amber pharmacy bottle. The label read, "Cough medicine. Take as needed for severe cough." I picked it up, curious about what the doctor had prescribed. The bottle felt suspiciously light. I unscrewed the white cap and took a careful sniff. Water. Just plain tap water with a computer-printed CVS pharmacy label carefully affixed to the side. My stomach dropped like I'd missed the bottom step on a staircase in the dark. From somewhere upstairs came a muffled sound. Not coughing. Definitely not the harsh, barking cough I'd heard over the phone that morning. This was something else entirely, rhythmic, urgent, unmistakably human, but not at all related to respiratory illness. I set the soup container down next to the fake medicine bottle and moved toward the staircase, each step feeling like I was walking through wet concrete. The hardwood creaked under my weight in all the familiar places. The third step that had always groaned since we bought the house. The seventh step that squeaked unless you stepped on the left side. The master bedroom door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of afternoon sunlight cutting through the gap. Through that narrow opening, I could see movement. Shadows shifting back and forth in an urgent rhythm that made my chest tighten. I pushed the door open with my fingertips. There was Diane, my wife of 18 years, tangled in the Egyptian cotton sheets we'd received as a wedding gift from her Aunt Margaret. She wasn't alone. Carl Westbrook from 3 houses down was with her, both of them so completely absorbed in their afternoon activity that they didn't hear the door open, didn't hear my sharp intake of breath, didn't notice me standing there until Carl happened to look up and his face went white as fresh snow. Sweet Jesus! Carl scrambled backwards, falling off our king-sized bed with a thud that shook the dresser. His clothes were scattered across our bedroom floor like debris from a tornado. Diane bolted upright, clutching the sheet to her chest with both hands. "Marcus! You're supposed to be at school. What are you doing here?" "Having lunch," I said, my voice sounding strange and disconnected, like it was coming from someone else's throat. "And you're supposed to be dying from the worst respiratory infection in recent memory." Carl was hopping around on one foot, desperately trying to get his boxer shorts on while maintaining some semblance of dignity. It wasn't working. "Look, Marcus, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" "Because it looks like you're sleeping with my wife in my bedroom while your wife Amy is in Seattle selling medical devices to hospitals." I took a step into the room. That's not what's happening here. We can talk about this like adults, Carl stammered, finally getting his underwear situated. There's no need to… To what? Get upset? Call Amy? I noticed Diane's iPhone on the nightstand, screen still illuminated with notifications. I reached for it before she could react. Let's see what CVS Pharmacy has been texting you about. The contact name clearly read CVS Pharmacy, but the message preview showed something that definitely hadn't come from any drugstore. Amy's flight leaves at 6 a.m. Coast is clear by 8. Hotel downtown has day rates. Room 247 is quiet. Called in sick. Boss bought it completely. See you at 10. I swiped up to see more messages. The conversation thread stretched back for months. Dozens and dozens of coordinated lies, fake medical emergencies, and carefully planned afternoon meetings while I stood in front of classrooms teaching teenagers about personal responsibility and making good choices. 8 months, I said, scrolling through the evidence. You've been doing this for 8 months. Marcus, please, let me explain, Diane started. Explain what? How you've been faking illnesses to sleep with our neighbor, how you've been stealing sick days from your bank to have affairs, how you've been lying to my face every single day for 2/3 of a year. Carl had managed to get his pants on and was frantically looking for his shirt. Marcus, man, these things happen. Marriage is complicated. Get dressed, I interrupted, my voice steady now, controlled. Both of you, get out of my house. This is my house too, Diane protested. I've lived here for 18 years. Actually, you haven't. Check the property deed, Diane. This house belonged to my grandmother. She left it to me, specifically to me, in her will. Your name appears nowhere on any legal document related to this property. I gestured toward the bedroom door. You have 2 minutes to get dressed and leave before I call Amy in Seattle and tell her exactly what her husband does when she's working 60 hours. Weeks to build their restaurant empire. You wouldn't, Carl said, but his voice lacked conviction. I held up Diane's phone, thumb hovering over Amy's contact information. Try me. 1 minute 45 seconds. They dressed in record time and left without another word, Carl practically dragging Diane down the stairs and out the front door. I heard her BMW start up, followed by the Mercedes. Both cars drove away quickly, tires squealing slightly on the asphalt. I stood in my bedroom, our former bedroom, looking at the evidence of 18 years of marriage destroyed in a single afternoon. The unmade bed with sheets that would have to be burned. The fake medicine bottle downstairs that proved premeditation. The phone full of lies and carefully orchestrated deception that went back 8 months. I walked downstairs to the kitchen and called Peterson Security. Peterson Security, this is Jake speaking. How can I help you today? I need all the locks on my house changed immediately. This is an emergency situation. What kind of emergency are we talking about, sir? Break-in? Burglary? The kind where my wife just left with another man and she's not coming back. Ever. Ah, yes, sir. We handle those situations regularly. I can have a locksmith there within 2 hours. Will you be paying cash or credit? Credit card. And Jake? I need this done perfectly. New deadbolts, new door handles, new garage door codes, everything. Understood completely, sir. We'll take care of you. My next call went to Rebecca Stone, a divorce attorney I'd found through a quick Google search. Her website promised aggressive representation for complex marital dissolution. That sounded about right. Stone and Associates, this is Rebecca speaking. Ms. Stone, my name is Marcus Trent. I'm the principal at Lincoln High School here in town. I need to speak with a divorce attorney immediately regarding adultery with substantial evidence. How substantial are we talking, Mr. Trent? I just walked in on my wife with our neighbor. I have 8 months of text messages between them, proving ongoing adultery, coordination of fake sick days, and systematic deception. How quickly can you see me? I can see you in 45 minutes if you can get here. Bring everything. The phone, any financial documents, property deeds, anything relevant. I'll be there in 30 minutes. But first, I had one more call to make. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Amy Westbrook's number. We'd exchanged information 2 summers ago when she'd volunteered to coordinate the neighborhood block party. She'd struck me as a sharp, no-nonsense woman who worked incredibly hard at her medical device sales job. My finger hovered over her name for a moment. This call would destroy her world just as thoroughly as mine had been destroyed. But she deserved to know the truth. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up. Marcus? This is unexpected. Is everything okay? Amy, I'm calling from my house. I need to tell you something about Carl, and I'm afraid it's going to be very difficult to hear. What about Carl? Is he hurt? He's not hurt, but Amy. He's been having an affair. With my wife, Diane. I just found them together in my bedroom. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Amy, are you there? I'm here. Her voice had gone completely flat. What did you just say to me? I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, but Carl has been sleeping with Diane. I have months of text messages between them. They've been meeting every time you travel for work. How long? Her voice was barely a whisper. According to the messages I found, about 8 months. They've been coordinating their meetings around your business trips. 8 months. She repeated it like she was testing how the words tasted. 8 months. I've been working 70-hour weeks for 8 months, trying to expand our restaurant business while he's been... She stopped. Marcus, can you send me proof? Screenshots? Anything you have? Of course. Amy, I'm truly sorry you have to find out this way. Don't apologize. Most people would have minded their own business. I could hear her taking deep breaths. Send me everything you have. I'm flying home tonight. Your meetings? My meetings can wait. My marriage apparently can't. After sending Amy detailed screenshots of every damning text message, I drove to Rebecca Stone's law office in the professional complex downtown. She was a woman in her early 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of intense eyes that suggested she'd seen every possible variety of human betrayal. Show me what you've got, she said without preamble, gesturing to the leather chair across from her mahogany desk. I handed her my phone with the screenshots already pulled up. She scrolled through them methodically, occasionally pausing to make notes on a yellow legal pad with a Mont Blanc pen. These are exceptionally clear, she said after reviewing everything. Premeditated, ongoing adultery with detailed evidence of planning, coordination, and systematic deception. The fake sick days add another layer of fraud. How long have you been married? 18 years this October. Children? 2, both adults. Sarah's finishing her master's degree in psychology at Northwestern. Michael just started his engineering career in Denver with an aerospace company. Excellent. No custody complications. She made additional notes. Joint assets? The house, which was actually my inheritance from my grandmother. Joint savings accounts. Both our cars. Retirement accounts from our respective employers. Diane works as a branch manager at First National Bank. Wait, Rebecca looked up sharply. She's a bank manager and she's been using fraudulent sick leave? According to these messages, yes. 47 fake sick days over 8 months. Mr. Trent, that's not just adultery. That's employment fraud. If she's been receiving sick pay for days she spent with Mr. Westbrook, she's committed theft from her employer. Rebecca leaned forward. In this state, adultery is grounds for divorce and significantly impacts asset distribution. With this level of evidence plus employment fraud, you're in an extraordinarily strong legal position. What does that mean practically? It means we can pursue an unequal distribution of marital assets heavily in your favor. It means no alimony. It means we can probably get her to accept a settlement rather than face the embarrassment of a public trial. She paused. But there's something else we need to discuss. The employment fraud could be criminal. Criminal how? If she's stolen thousands of dollars in fraudulent sick pay, the bank could file charges. Theft over a certain amount becomes a felony. Rebecca's pen tapped against her desk. Mr. Trent, I need to ask you a direct question. Do you want a clean divorce or do you want to pursue every available legal remedy? What's the difference? A clean divorce means we file, present our evidence, negotiate a reasonable settlement, and move on with your life. Full legal remedy means we contact her employer with evidence of fraud. We pursue criminal charges if applicable, and we make sure there are comprehensive consequences for her choices. I thought about Diane upstairs with Carl, about 18 years of believing I had a solid marriage, about all the school events and community functions where I'd spoken about integrity and character, while my wife was systematically lying to everyone. I want her to face appropriate consequences for what she's done. Rebecca smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. Then let's make sure that happens. Back at Lincoln High, I requested an emergency meeting with Superintendent Patricia Johnson. Patricia had been my supervisor for 7 years and had consistently supported my leadership at the school. She was a straight-talking woman who'd worked her way up from classroom teacher to district superintendent over 30 years. Marcus, you look terrible. What's happened? Patricia, I need to request emergency personal leave starting tomorrow morning. There's been a significant family crisis. Of course. What kind of crisis? Is there anything the district can do to help? Patricia and I had always maintained a professional relationship built on mutual respect and direct communication. This didn't seem like the time to start being evasive. I discovered this afternoon that my wife has been having an affair. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning. Patricia's expression immediately shifted from professional concern to personal sympathy. Oh, Marcus, I'm so sorry. That's devastating. Thank you. I know the timing is challenging with state testing preparation, but don't you dare apologize for needing time to handle this situation. Jim Morrison can cover your administrative duties, and the assistant principals can manage the daily operations. She stood up and walked around her desk. Marcus, take whatever time you need. Your position will be here when you're ready to come back. I appreciate that more than you know. Is there anything else? Any other support you need from the district? Just the personal leave. I should be back by Friday, hopefully with the immediate legal issues resolved. Patricia nodded firmly. And Marcus? I hope you take her for every penny she's worth. From school, I drove directly to the First National Bank branch across town. Not Diane's downtown location, but the suburban branch where nobody would recognize me. I needed to protect our joint assets before Diane realized what was happening and tried to drain our accounts. The customer service representative, a young woman named Jessica, was professionally helpful. I'd like to withdraw funds from this joint savings account, I said, sliding my driver's license and debit card across her desk. How much would you like to withdraw, Mr. Trent? Half the balance. According to my last statement, that should be approximately $23,000. Jessica processed the withdrawal and helped me open a new individual account at the credit union down the street. While I was there, I requested printed statements for all our joint accounts going back 12 months. That evening, I spread those bank statements across my dining room table and began looking for patterns. It didn't take long to find them. Cash withdrawals, always between $200 and $400, occurring with suspicious regularity. Small amounts that wouldn't trigger any automatic alerts, but consistent enough to add up significantly over time. I cross-referenced the withdrawal dates with Amy's travel schedule, which I could piece together from neighborhood conversations and social media posts. The correlation was undeniable. Every time Amy left town for a business trip, Diane made a cash withdrawal the day before. Over 8 months, she'd taken out nearly $15,000 more than her usual spending pattern. Money I'd assumed was going toward household expenses, groceries, and her occasional shopping trips with her sister. I created a detailed spreadsheet documenting every suspicious transaction, noting the dates, amounts, and corresponding evidence of Amy's travel schedule. The pattern was so clear it could have been used as a textbook example of how to track financial deception. Wednesday morning, I drafted a formal letter to David Morrison, First National Bank's regional manager. I'd met Morrison several times at community events. Lincoln High maintained partnerships with local businesses for student internship programs, and Morrison had always been supportive of education initiatives. Dear Mr. Morrison, I am writing to inform you of serious misconduct by one of your employees that requires immediate investigation. My wife, Diane Trent, serves as branch manager at your downtown location. Yesterday, I discovered that she has been conducting an extramarital affair and using fraudulent sick leave to facilitate these meetings. The attached documentation demonstrates a clear pattern of fake sick days over an 8-month period, carefully coordinated with her lover's schedule. Ms. Trent has been receiving full sick pay for days she spent in hotels with another man, which constitutes theft of company funds and violation of employment agreements. As a community member and as someone who believes strongly in accountability, I felt obligated to bring this matter to your attention. The evidence shows at least 47 fraudulent sick days over 8 months, representing thousands of dollars in stolen wages. I have also discovered unusual cash withdrawal patterns from our joint accounts that correspond directly with these fraudulent absences, suggesting she has been financing this affair with company money and family resources. Please contact my attorney, Rebecca Stone at Stone & Associates, if you require additional documentation or formal statements. Respectfully, Marcus Trent, Principal, Lincoln High School. I printed the letter on professional letterhead, attached copies of the most damning text messages and my financial analysis, and drove to First National's corporate headquarters. I need to deliver this to Mr. Morrison personally, I told the receptionist, a well-dressed woman in her 30s. I can certainly pass along a message. This concerns employee fraud and requires his immediate attention. I believe he'll want to see it today. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. Mr. Trent, this is David Morrison from First National. I've just finished reading your letter and reviewing the attached documentation. This is extremely serious. Yes, sir, I believe it is. Can you come in this afternoon at 2 o'clock to discuss this matter with myself and our Human Resources Director? Absolutely. Mr. Trent, I want you to know that we take fraud allegations very seriously at First National. If what you've documented is accurate, there will be immediate and significant consequences. Wednesday afternoon, I found myself in Morrison's corner office with Linda Hayes from Human Resources and Thomas Crawford from the bank's legal department. They'd arranged the documentation I'd provided in neat piles across a conference table. Mr. Trent, Morrison began, we've had a chance to review everything you've provided. The evidence appears to document systematic fraud over an extended period. That's correct. Linda Hayes consulted her notes. According to our records, Diane has been with First National for 14 years. She was recently under consideration for promotion to regional manager. This situation is devastating from multiple perspectives. We'll need to conduct a formal investigation, Thomas Crawford added. Can you provide a sworn statement detailing how you discovered this fraud? Of course. What's your typical procedure in cases like this? I asked. Morrison exchanged glances with his colleagues. Immediate suspension pending investigation. Complete review of badge access logs, computer activity, and employment records. If the investigation confirms fraud, immediate termination and potential criminal referral to law enforcement. How long does that process usually take? For something this clear-cut, probably 48 hours for the investigation, then immediate action, Linda Hayes replied. Mr. Trent, we appreciate your integrity in bringing this to our attention. Most people would have stayed silent. Fraud is fraud, regardless of who commits it. After signing formal statements and providing contact information for my attorney, I left the bank feeling like I'd done the right thing. Diane had made choices that had consequences beyond our marriage. She'd stolen from her employer, and that employer deserved to know. Thursday morning brought the sounds I'd been expecting. Diane's phone, which was still connected to our shared iCloud account, started receiving calls from First National's main number at 6 a.m. The calls appeared on my iPad as Diane Trent 14 times between 6 and 8 a.m. At 8:15, she called me directly. "Marcus, what the hell did you do?" I told the truth to the appropriate people. They suspended me. They want me to come in for some kind of investigation. They're treating me like a criminal. You are a criminal. You stole $12,000 in fraudulent sick pay. I never stole anything. Those were legitimate sick days. For what illness? Nymphomania? I kept my voice level. Diane, you called in sick 47 times when you weren't sick. You received full pay for those days. That's theft. That's fraud. That's a crime. You vindictive bastard. You're trying to destroy my life. I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm simply making sure that people know the truth about what you've done. I paused. You destroyed your own life when you decided to have an affair and steal from your employer to pay for it. She hung up on me. An hour later, Amy Westbrook called from the airport. Marcus, I flew back from Seattle last night. I'm at the attorney's office right now. How are you holding up? I'm furious. I've been working myself to death for 8 months trying to expand our restaurant business, and Carl's been using that time to have an affair with your wife. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. I spoke with our business attorney this morning. Since Carl and I own the restaurants as joint marital property, I was able to get an emergency injunction freezing all business bank accounts. What does that mean for the restaurants? It means Carl can't access any money to operate them. No payroll, no supplier payments, no operating capital. He called me screaming about it 2 hours ago. That seems like a reasonable response. Reasonable? Marcus, I've been carrying this business for months while he played around. I found out from our restaurant managers that he's been leaving work early 3 days a week, claiming he had supplier meetings that never actually happened. Amy's voice was getting sharper with each word. He's been sabotaging our business while conducting his affair. What happens to the restaurants now? Now, I file for divorce and demand an unequal distribution of assets based on his adultery and business negligence. Our business attorney is also reviewing Carl's partnership agreements to see if there are any morality clauses that might void his ownership rights. Amy, I'm truly sorry this happened to both of us. Don't apologize. Be grateful we found out when we did. How many more years could this have gone on if we hadn't discovered it? That afternoon, a process server appeared at my front door. Marcus Trent? Yes. You're being served with legal papers. He handed me a manila envelope and walked back to his car. Inside were divorce papers filed by Diane, claiming irreconcilable differences and requesting an equal division of all marital assets, including the house, plus spousal support based on the difference in our incomes. I immediately called Rebecca Stone. She beat us to the courthouse, Rebecca said after I read her the filing details. But this actually helps our case. How is that possible? She's filing for irreconcilable differences instead of addressing the adultery directly. That tells me she's trying to hide her misconduct and hoping for a standard no-fault divorce settlement. Rebecca sounded pleased. We'll file a counter-petition citing adultery with comprehensive evidence, and we'll add claims about her employment fraud affecting the marital estate. What about her claim to the house? Do you have documentation proving the house was your inheritance? Yes, my grandmother's will, the probate court orders, and the property transfer documents. Then the house is separate property, and Diane has no legal claim to it. In fact, given the adultery and fraud, we can probably force her to vacate immediately. When do we file our response? Tomorrow morning. This is going to be a very short legal process, Mr. Trent. Friday morning, I was having coffee when someone knocked on my front door. Through the peephole, I saw a middle-aged man in an inexpensive suit carrying a briefcase. Mr. Trent? I'm Jerry Walsh, certified process server. I have papers for Diane Trent. She doesn't live here anymore. Do you know where I can locate her for service? Try her parents' house on Maple Street. George and Martha Peterson. I provided the address. What type of papers are you serving? Divorce counterpetition with adultery charges. I almost smiled. Those would be from my attorney. Jerry Walsh looked confused. You hired me to serve papers on your own wife? My attorney hired you. And yes, that's exactly what happened. 2 hours later, Diane called me, and she was absolutely furious. You're claiming adultery? You're trying to take the house? How dare you? I'm not claiming adultery, Diane. I'm proving it with 8 months of text messages and photographic evidence. You can't take the house. I've been making mortgage payments for 18 years. There is no mortgage. The house was paid in full when I inherited it from my grandmother. You've been contributing to property taxes, insurance, and maintenance, which is what married people do when they live together. This is insane. You can't just kick me out of my own home. It's not your home. It never was your home. Check the property deed. Your name doesn't appear anywhere on it. I kept my voice calm and factual. You have 30 days to collect your personal belongings. Everything else stays with the house. Where am I supposed to live? That's no longer my concern. Perhaps Carl has some suggestions, assuming Amy hasn't frozen all his assets too. Carl won't even return my calls. Amy destroyed his business and he blames me for everything. Sounds like actions have consequences. She hung up, but called back an hour later. Marcus, please, can we talk about this reasonably? Can we go to marriage counseling or something? Marriage counseling? I couldn't hide my disbelief. You want to go to counseling after conducting an 8-month affair while stealing from your employer? I made mistakes. You made 47 separate deliberate decisions to lie to me, lie to your boss, and sleep with our neighbor. That's not a mistake, Diane. That's a pattern of criminal behavior. It wasn't criminal. The bank disagrees. So does their legal department. That evening, I decided to drive past Carl's restaurants to assess the situation. Carl's Corner Cafe on Main Street, which usually had a decent dinner crowd, was nearly empty at 7 p.m. The second location, Westbrook's Family Dining, had a temporarily closed due to staffing issues sign taped to the front door. The third restaurant was technically open, but the parking lot contained maybe 6 cars. I stopped at a gas station to fill up and overheard 2 women talking near the convenience store entrance. Did you hear about the Westbrook situation? The restaurant people? What happened? Turns out Carl was having an affair with that bank manager, Diane something. His wife found out and froze all their business accounts. None of the restaurants can make payroll. You're kidding. Which bank manager? Works at First National downtown. Or worked. Word is she got fired for fraud. Fraud? Something about fake sick days. The whole thing's a mess. The scandal was spreading through our small community faster than I'd expected. In a town of 15,000 people, news like this traveled at light speed. Saturday morning, Patricia Johnson called me at home. Marcus, I hope you don't mind me calling on a weekend, but I wanted to check on how you're doing. I'm managing better than I expected, honestly. That's good to hear. Listen, there's something you should know about. The school board received a phone call yesterday. My stomach tightened. What kind of phone call? Someone called asking questions about your character and fitness to serve as principal, given your domestic situation, and whether the district should be concerned about your judgment. Who called? The person wouldn't identify themselves, but board member Sarah Miller has caller ID on her office phone. The call came from First National Bank's main number. Diane was trying to sabotage my career because I'd reported her fraud. The audacity was breathtaking. What did the board tell them? Bob Martinez took the call personally. He told them, and I quote, Marcus Trent has more integrity in his little finger than most people have in their entire body. And if you're calling to suggest otherwise, you can go straight to hell? Patricia chuckled. Obviously, those weren't Bob's exact words, but the sentiment was clear. Patricia, I need to tell you something. I believe Diane made that call because I reported her employment fraud to her bank. She's trying to retaliate against me professionally. We assumed as much. Marcus, your job is completely secure. The board voted unanimously to reaffirm their confidence in your leadership. You have our full support. Monday morning brought news I hadn't anticipated. Rebecca called at 7 a.m. Marcus, are you available to talk? Of course. First National Bank filed criminal charges against Diane on Friday afternoon. She's being charged with felony fraud and computer crimes. Criminal charges? I thought they were just conducting an internal investigation. Their investigation confirms systematic fraud totaling over $18,000 when they included her early departures and falsified time records. In this state, theft over $10,000 is automatically a felony. What happens now? She'll be arraigned next week. If convicted, she's looking at up to 5 years in prison and full restitution to the bank. Rebecca paused. More importantly for our divorce case, criminal fraud charges eliminate any possibility of her claiming moral equivalency or seeking favorable treatment from a judge. When will we know about the criminal proceedings? Arraignment is scheduled for Thursday morning. I'll attend as your representative to monitor the proceedings. What does this mean for our divorce case? It means we're negotiating from a position of absolute strength. Her attorney will be desperate to avoid a public trial that would expose all the details of her fraud and adultery. Tuesday afternoon, I was reviewing budget reports in my office when my secretary buzzed me on the intercom. Mr. Trent, there's a Diane Trent in the main office asking to see you. She says she's your wife. Send her to my office, please. Diane entered looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually immaculate hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing the same clothes I'd seen her in 2 days earlier, and she had dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. Marcus, we need to talk. About what specifically? About stopping this insanity. Criminal charges? Really? You're actually trying to send me to prison? I'm not trying to send you anywhere. I reported employment fraud to your employer, and they made their own decision about filing charges. Over $18,000? That's nothing to a bank. It's not nothing to me. It's not nothing to every honest employee who actually gets sick and needs those benefits legitimately. I leaned back in my chair. Diane, you committed fraud. You stole money from your employer for 8 months. Did you think there would be no consequences? I made some mistakes. You made dozens of calculated, premeditated decisions to defraud your employer. You created fake illness symptoms, you manipulated scheduling systems, you lied to supervisors, and you stole thousands of dollars. I stood up. That's not a mistake. That's a criminal enterprise. She started crying, but they seemed like calculated tears rather than genuine remorse. I could go to prison, Marcus. Actual prison. Over a stupid affair. You're not facing prison because of an affair. You're facing prison because you committed felony fraud. I walked to my office door and opened it. This is my workplace, Diane. You need to leave. Please, can't we work something out? Can't we go to counseling? Can't we try to save our marriage? Save our marriage? I stared at her in disbelief. You conducted an 8-month affair while stealing from your employer and lying to my face every single day. What exactly do you think there is to save? We had 18 years together. You threw away 18 years for cheap afternoon sex with our neighbor while stealing money to pay for hotel rooms. I gestured toward the hallway. We're done, Diane. Completely and permanently done. She left without another word, but I could hear her crying in the hallway. Wednesday morning, I woke up to my doorbell ringing insistently. I looked out the front window and saw Carl Westbrook on my porch, gesturing frantically and obviously agitated. I opened the door but left the chain lock engaged. Marcus, we need to have a conversation. No, we really don't. This situation is getting completely out of control. Amy's destroyed our business over one mistake, and now Diane's facing criminal charges. This has gone too far. One mistake? I couldn't hide my incredulity. Carl, you were sleeping with my wife for 8 months. That's not a mistake. That's a sustained campaign of deception. Look, I'm sorry about the affair, but what's done is done. Can't you talk to Amy? Ask her to unfreeze the business accounts? People are going to lose their jobs because of this. People are losing their jobs because you decided to have an affair instead of focusing on running your restaurants. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You and Diane made adult choices. Now you get to experience adult consequences. I started to close the door. Marcus, please. I'm going to lose everything I've worked for. You should have considered that possibility before you decided to betray your wife and destroy your marriage. I removed the chain lock and stepped onto the porch. Carl, let me explain something to you. I spent 18 years believing I had a solid marriage while my wife was planning elaborate deceptions to sleep with you. Amy spent 8 months working herself to death to build your business while you were having afternoon sex with my wife. We were both betrayed by people we trusted. Neither of us owes you anything. But the restaurants are Amy's problem now, and she's handling them however she sees fit. I went back inside and closed the door firmly. That afternoon, Rebecca called with an update on settlement negotiations. Diane's attorney contacted me this morning. They want to discuss a plea agreement. For the criminal charges or the divorce? Both. They're hoping to package everything together. She pleads guilty to reduce charges, pays restitution, and we settle the divorce quickly and quietly. What kind of settlement are they proposing? She waives all claims to marital assets except for a 30% share of retirement accounts. She accepts the house as your separate property, and she agrees to vacate immediately. In exchange, you don't testify at her criminal trial about the financial impact of her fraud on your marriage. Can I choose not to testify anyway? As her spouse, you can't be compelled to testify against her. But as the person who discovered the fraud, the prosecution might want your testimony about the pattern of deception. What do you recommend? Take the settlement. She's offering to give up significant assets to avoid the embarrassment of a public trial. You'll come out ahead financially and you'll be free of this situation much faster. What about accountability? What about consequences for her actions? She's still facing criminal charges, loss of career, and public humiliation. Those are significant consequences. Rebecca paused. Marcus, sometimes the best revenge is moving on with your life while they're still dealing with the mess they created. Thursday morning, I received a call from David Morrison at First National. Mr. Trent, I wanted to give you an update on our investigation and the criminal proceedings. What did you find? The scope of Diane's fraud was even more extensive than we initially realized. Badge access logs show she was routinely leaving work early while claiming full hours. Security footage confirms she was absent from the building when she told supervisors she was in meetings. How much more extensive? When we include the time theft and falsified records, the total loss approaches $25,000 over approximately 14 months. 14 months? I thought it was 8 months. The affair may have been 8 months, but the employment fraud started earlier. She was manipulating her schedule and lying about her whereabouts long before the text messages with Carl began. What does this mean for the criminal case? It means she's looking at enhanced charges and a longer potential sentence. The prosecution is treating this as organized fraud rather than simple theft. Morrison paused. Mr. Trent, there's something else. Diane was less than 60 days away from full vesting in our executive pension plan when we terminated her employment. What's that worth? Approximately $300,000 at retirement age. She forfeited it all when she was terminated for fraud. She lost $300,000. Every penny. Employees terminated for cost forfeit all unvested benefits immediately. Morrison's voice carried a note of satisfaction. Mr. Trent, your integrity in reporting this fraud has saved the bank substantial money and protected other employees from working with someone who was stealing from the company. Friday afternoon, I was leaving school when I spotted Amy Westbrook waiting by my car in the parking lot. Amy, what brings you here? I wanted to update you on Carl's situation and ask you something. How bad has it gotten for him? Remember how I mentioned checking for morality clauses in our business agreements? She looked pleased with herself. Every one of our franchise agreements contains language about conduct that brings negative publicity to the brand. And? The franchisor got wind of the adultery scandal and launched their own investigation. They're reviewing all 3 restaurant locations for potential franchise violations. What could happen? Carl could lose the right to operate under their brand name. Since the restaurants are heavily mortgaged and depend on brand recognition, losing the franchises would mean immediate bankruptcy. Where does that leave you financially? I'm protected. I kept detailed records of my contributions to the business, both financial and operational. My attorney believes I can recover most of my investment and walk away clean. Amy got into her car and rolled down the window. Marcus, I'm moving back to Atlanta next month. I got a job offer from my previous company. Better position, better salary, and 3,000 miles from this disaster. That sounds like a fresh start. Exactly what I need. But before I leave, I wanted to give you some advice. I'm listening. Don't let them back into your life. I know Diane's going to try to reconcile once she realizes how completely she's destroyed everything. Don't take her back. I won't. Good. You deserve so much better than what she gave you. The following Monday brought the news I'd been expecting. Rebecca called during my lunch break. It's over, Marcus. Diane signed the settlement agreement this morning. What are the final terms? You keep the house, the savings account, and 70% of all retirement funds. She gets her car, her personal belongings, and 30% of retirement accounts. No alimony, no spousal support, no further financial obligations. What about the criminal charges? She's pleading guilty to felony fraud with a suspended sentence, 3 years probation, and full restitution to the bank. If she stays out of trouble for 3 years, the felony gets reduced to a misdemeanor. How much restitution? $25,000 plus court costs and probation fees. She'll be paying approximately $800 a month for the next 4 years. On a cashier's salary? That's her problem to solve. That evening, I walked through my house, and started making plans. The master bedroom would be completely gutted and redecorated. The kitchen could use modern appliances and updated countertops. Maybe I'd finally build that workshop in the garage I'd been considering for years. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe normally. 6 months later, I was grocery shopping when I saw her. Diane was working as a cashier at the supermarket across town, wearing the store's uniform and looking exhausted. Her hair had gone gray at the roots, and she'd lost significant weight. She looked older than her 41 years. Our eyes met across the checkout lanes. She looked away immediately, focusing intently on scanning items for the customer in front of her. I finished my shopping and headed to the parking lot. As I was loading groceries into my trunk, I heard footsteps behind me. Marcus? I turned around. Diane was standing there in her grocery store uniform, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. What do you want, Diane? I wanted to apologize for everything that happened. Apologize for what specifically? The 8 months of adultery? The felony fraud? Trying to sabotage my career? Which particular part are you sorry about? All of it. I know I made terrible choices. Yes, you did. I've lost everything, Marcus. My career, my pension, my reputation. Carl dumped me for some 25-year-old he met on a dating app. My parents barely speak to me. I can't even afford to rent a decent apartment. You have exactly what you earned through your choices. I know I hurt you badly, but I'm desperate. I can barely make my restitution payments on this salary. If you could help me with a small loan. No. Please, Marcus. I'm drowning financially. You should have considered the financial consequences before you decided to commit fraud to fund your affair. I closed my trunk and got into my car. Your financial problems are no longer my responsibility. Marcus, please just consider. Diane, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You chose to destroy 18 years of marriage for cheap sex with our neighbor. You chose to steal $25,000 from your employer. You chose to try to sabotage my career when you got caught. Those were all your choices. I started the engine. Now you get to live with the consequences of those choices. That's called being an adult. I drove away, leaving her standing alone in the parking lot. 3 months later, I was at the annual school district recognition ceremony when Superintendent Patricia Johnson called my name. This year's Administrator of the Year award goes to Marcus Trent for exceptional leadership, unwavering integrity, and dedication to educational excellence. As I walked to the podium to accept the Crystal Award, I noticed familiar faces in the audience. School board members, fellow administrators, teachers from Lincoln High, and parents of students I'd worked with over the years. People who knew my character and respected my work. I gave my acceptance speech about the importance of integrity in education, about being role models for our students, and about the responsibility we have to demonstrate that actions have consequences. I talked about accountability, about making good choices, and about the importance of facing up to our mistakes rather than making excuses. After the ceremony, I was walking to my car when I saw her again. Diane was standing near the parking lot entrance with a man I didn't recognize. Both were wearing grocery store uniforms, probably having just finished their evening shifts. She approached me as I reached my car. Marcus, congratulations. You deserve this recognition. Thank you. I'm proud of you. No, Diane. You don't get to be proud of me. You don't get to have opinions about my achievements. I unlocked my car door. You gave up the right to be part of my life when you decided to have an affair and commit fraud. Can't we at least be civil, for old time's sake? This is civil. Civil is me not pressing additional charges when you try to destroy my career. Civil is me not testifying at your criminal trial about what a lying, stealing, cheating person you are. I got into my car and rolled down the window. But if you ever contact me again, if you ever show up at my workplace or my home, if you ever try to insert yourself back into my life in any way, I will make sure everyone in this community knows exactly what kind of person you really are. I drove home to my house, hung my Administrator of the Year award on the living room wall next to my university diplomas and teaching certificates, and opened a craft beer from the brewery that had opened downtown. At 54 years old, I was truly starting over, but I was starting over free. That night, I sat on my back deck looking at the stars and thinking about choices and consequences, about how quickly 18 years of marriage could be destroyed by 8 months of lies, about how someone could go from bank manager making $60,000 a year to grocery store cashier making minimum wage in less than 12 months. 2 years later, I was dating Jennifer Walsh, the music teacher from the middle school across town. She was a widow who'd lost her husband to cancer 3 years earlier, and she understood both loss and the importance of starting over. We'd met at a district professional development workshop, bonded over our shared love of education, and discovered we both enjoyed hiking, cooking, and old movies. Jennifer was everything Diane hadn't been. Honest, straightforward, supportive of my career, and genuinely interested in building something real together rather than just taking what she could get. One Saturday morning, Jennifer and I were having breakfast at the cafe downtown when I saw Carl Westbrook bussing tables. He was wearing a server's uniform and looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past 24 months. Our eyes met briefly, and he looked away quickly. "Who is that?" Jennifer asked, noticing my reaction. "That's Carl Westbrook. He used to own 3 restaurants in town." "What happened to him?" "He made some very poor choices and lost everything." I reached across the table and took her hand. "It's a long story, but the short version is that actions have consequences." Jennifer squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you learned that lesson without having to lose everything yourself." "So am I." As we left the cafe, I felt genuinely grateful for the path my life had taken. Diane's affair and fraud had initially felt like the end of my world, but it had actually been the beginning of something much better. I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd thought, that I could handle crisis and betrayal and still maintain my integrity. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is discovering who people really are before you waste any more years of your life with them. I never saw Diane again after that night at the awards ceremony. According to community gossip, she'd moved to another state to start over, somewhere nobody knew about her criminal record. Carl eventually lost all 3 restaurants and left town as well, reportedly moving back in with his elderly parents in another state. Amy had thrived in Atlanta, eventually becoming a regional sales director for a major medical device company. She sent me a Christmas card every year with updates on her life and career. She'd remarried a fellow sales executive and seemed genuinely happy. My children, Sarah and Michael, had been supportive throughout the entire ordeal. They'd seen the evidence of their mother's affair and fraud, and while it had been painful for them to accept, they understood that I'd handled the situation with integrity and dignity. Both remained in regular contact with me, but had minimal relationship with their mother. 5 years after that Tuesday afternoon when I'd come home with chicken soup and discovered my wife's affair, I was a different person living a completely different life. I'd been promoted to district curriculum director, Jennifer and I had gotten engaged, and I'd renovated the house from top to bottom, erasing every trace of my previous marriage. The master bedroom had been completely redecorated with new furniture, new paint, and new memories. The kitchen had granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. The garage workshop was finished and well-equipped. Everything in the house reflected my choices, my taste, and my future, rather than a past I was trying to forget. I'd learned that justice and revenge were different things, but they could sometimes look remarkably similar. I hadn't set out to destroy Diane's life. I'd simply made sure that the truth about her actions was known to the people who needed to know it. Her employer needed to know about the fraud. The court system needed to know about the adultery. Amy needed to know about the affair. Everything that had happened to Diane after that was the natural consequence of her own choices. She'd chosen to have an affair. She'd chosen to commit fraud. She'd chosen to try to sabotage my career when she got caught. Each choice had led inevitably to the next consequence, and I'd simply let that process play out naturally. The most satisfying part wasn't her punishment. It was my freedom. Freedom from lies, from someone who could betray me so completely, from a relationship that had clearly meant much less to her than it had meant to me. I'd been given the gift of seeing someone's true character, and I'd acted on that knowledge decisively. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, while the people who betrayed you face the natural consequences of their choices. Sometimes justice looks like a lying, cheating thief losing everything they'd worked for because they decided that immediate gratification was more important than integrity. And sometimes the most important lesson you can learn is that you're stronger, more resilient, and more deserving of good things than you ever imagined. That lesson was worth every difficult moment of the process that had taught it to me.